So in the last video, we got our latitude down into our hemisphere display component. Now the only other thing that we have to do is help it to figure out which hemisphere the user is in. So we're going to say that if the latitude is greater than 0, our user must be in the northern hemisphere. And if it's less than 0, that means that our user is in the southern hemisphere. That makes sense. So now we're going to put together a little bit of code to essentially determine the hemisphere. But before we get moving on that, I do want to make, we'll deconstruct our props a little bit so that we can write a cleaner code. So let me show you what I mean. As you see right here, now we passed props as an argument to this component, and then we get the user's current latitude inside of this props by saying props.latitude right here. Now, instead of doing that, we could simply remove that props argument and place a set of curly braces. And then inside of these curly braces, I'll just put our latitude. And then any time that we are going to want to use latitude inside of our component, we can just call it latitude instead of saying props.latitude. You with me? So we get the latitude property inside the props object thanks to ES 2015 deconstruction syntax. So maybe you don't believe me. So let's test it then. See if it's working as we expect it to. We're going to remove that syntax and just say latitude. Let's save this and flip back over to the browser. And, okay, you owe me a penny. It is working as it was before. All right. So now we might be able to determine which hemisphere the user is in. Now to do that, we're going to use a JavaScript ternary expression. So we're going to say const hemisphere is equal to, and then we put our ternary expression. Now, if the latitude is greater than 0, we will put here a question mark, which means that if that's the case, and then we will return the northern hemisphere. Follow? So after that, we're going to be able to put a semicolon here, which means that if it is not greater than 0, in this case, we are going to return southern hemisphere. So again, we'll turn to the JavaScript ternary expression if this expression right here will be true. Then we're going to return northern hemisphere from the overall expression. Otherwise, if latitude is less than 0, then we will return southern hemisphere instead. And then lastly, we're going to return the result of this entire ternary expression and assign its result to our hemisphere declaration right here. So let's go ahead and remove that console log here. All right, so now we need to customize how the hemisphere display component is going to look, depending on whether or not it is northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere. Now remember here that the ultimate goal is to show text on our browser, right? So I'm going to remove that hard-coded text of hemisphere display, and I will replace it with a set of curly braces. Now remember, we use those curly braces anytime we want to reference a JavaScript variable. In this case, we're going to put here the hemisphere variable, and it's going to say to us either northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, according to the result of that ternary expression. So let's save all this, and we'll test to see if it's working. What do you think? Okay, so we're now seeing that I am in the northern hemisphere. Now, to make sure that it's working correctly, I'm going to refresh my application, And I'm going to make sure that the correct hemisphere is being displayed. And what do you know? I'm still in the northern hemisphere, which for me, yes, indeed, that is correct. Now, I could change my geolocation override down here. So I could say that I'm in Sao Paulo, which is in the southern hemisphere. So now if I refresh the page, I should see southern hemisphere. And so now we have that text on our screen. I think we got something here. Now, the last thing we have to do is just a little bit of styling inside of our hemisphere display component. All right, so that was a lot. So I'm going to give you guys a little break, and we're going to continue on the other side.